Welcome to the newest episode of Short is the New Long. Your co-hosts are authors Adam Stump and Greg Krojak.
Welcome to a special edition of Short is the New Long. This is our inaugural author interview, and we are here today to interview a spectacular author that I have really just discovered and have really enjoyed discovering his work. And I'm excited to see where this interview is going to take us. So, Greg, why don't you tell us who we have on the podcast with us today?
Okay, well, you've opened box number 5, and it's Rob Edwards.
Woo! Everyone's a winner.
Hello.
Yeah. Rob is from what I understand, he's mostly been a short story author.
Yes.
But he has actually just written a full novel called The Ascension Machine, which he can plug at the end of the show.
I look forward to it.
If you come on for an interview, you can plug more or less what you want. It doesn't actually have to be a short read. Okay. So, Rob, the first question I have for you really is, why are you in Finland? I ask that because I live in Brazil, and that's the first thing people say to me. Why are you in Brazil? So why are you in Finland?
I'm in Finland because of J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh, wow. He moved you there?
This is one of my favourite stories. I will just spend a moment sharing. It's not really about writing at all. But essentially, I met my wife playing Lord of the Rings online, the massively multiplayer online role-playing game. When I met my wife, she was a beautiful elven princess, and so was I. Because
wow, you totally changed. You are no longer a beautiful elven princess.
No, you noticed that. Okay. No, basically, she needed. Her group was fighting this orc boss in Moria, and they needed some help defeating him. And I had a character that could help, so I jumped in and helped them. And on the day we met, I saved my I didn't know at the time, but wife to be from a terrible evil orc. And she's been saving me ever since.
Well, and they say that chivalry is dead.
Well, there we go. So she lived in Finnish. She is Finnish. We did this long distance thing for the longest time, and decided that we were going to get married. And then once we were married, we thought, which country are we going to live in? And we ended up with me living in Finland. It's quite a change after London, which is where I was before here. So it is a lot quieter, a lot greener, and quality of life and quality of air have improved significantly.
Oh, I imagine.
But I do miss theatre. I do miss theatre in English, which I used to get a lot of while I was in the UK.
But the question is, can you get mushy peas in Finland? That's
no, sadly. Well, I mean, there are websites, and I have used them from time to time, which will deliver British goods to us. So I've sent care packages of Monster Munch and gravy, which seems to be a thing they don't really understand in Finland.
Yeah, they don't understand gravy in Brazil either.
Right.
I had a tube of Bisto, and Elieni didn't realise. She looked at the date on it, and she thought, "Oh, I better throw this out because it's gone past the date." She didn't realise that it would probably last ages yet. And then when I discovered, I was, oh no, I can't buy that here. Still, that's what we get for living abroad, eh?
Yeah.
That's it.
Anyway, that's why I'm in Finland, because of J.R.R. Tolkien, because of elves, because of Lord of the Rings, and because of online computer games.
Excellent. Well, now, Rob, not only do you have the distinction of being our first interviewee, you also are the first author who's read an excerpt of your work, and the short story that you chose to read for us, which is available on the podcast for listeners to hear as well, is a short story called Lords of Negative Space.
Yeah.
And now, in your intro, you say that the full story, and I have not had an opportunity to check out the full story, although I will. You say it takes about an hour to read. Do you know what the word count is on that story, roughly?
I sort of have vague recollection. It's about 10 or 12,000 words. It's that kind of length.
Makes sense, yeah, because typically a 4,000 to 5,000 word story is maybe 25 minutes to read. So excellent. So it's a little bit on the longer end of short stories, but I can tell you just some of my observations about that short story read, and it's not just your smooth radio voice either. It is the actual story is immediately engaging. The way you kick it off, you have this sort of string of ethereal descriptors that were juxtaposed with their opposites, and unless you've actually heard it, you don't probably understand what I'm saying. But you immediately engage the reader. You use descriptive words from the get-go that just pull, and of course in this case it's the listener, not the reader, but pull the listener in, and it really worked. It was punchy, it was pithy. In our most recent podcast, Greg and I talk about the difference between short and long works, short stories and novels, and one of the things we talk about is economy of words. And I think that your story, even though it's at 10,000 words, it uses economy of words because each word is picked. Each word is very specific, and they're not verbose. The words are not verbose. They're not poetic words that you have to look up. They're words that everyone knows, yet at the same time evoke an emotional response. And I think that really worked, and I liked it. I really enjoyed the story. I thought that it really worked. I thought that it was everything a short story should be, and I was really happy to have that be the first author read that we featured because it is so engaging. I chose it of all my short stories that it is probably my favorite. It is something I wrote a while ago now, so it's always one of those ones where you're going, oh, I will never be as good as when I wrote that story. But imposter syndrome, yay! I think I said in the intro I did for it that it started out as a writing exercise because I write dialogue. I love writing dialogue. I love putting words in my characters' mouths, and away we go. And I really wanted to challenge myself to write a piece which didn't rely on dialogue. There is some dialogue later on in the story, but it was very much me trying to challenge myself to tell a story quite different from the stories I normally write. Sure. So, yeah. So it may mean that if you love that, then you won't like anything else I've written. I mean, that's possible. Well, good, because I'm not going to read it. Well, it worked.
I really enjoyed it as well. I found as soon as I started listening to it, I found it very atmospheric for a start. And I don't know if this was deliberate, but I got a kind of Alice in Wonderland vibe from it.
There's a bit of that. There's a bit of Neil Gaiman in there, I think, as well, maybe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the feel I took from it too.
But especially when Sarah was trying to reach the document, and however far she ran, she couldn't get any closer. I kind of imagined Lewis Carroll sitting. I assume he went upstairs rather than downstairs. I assume him nodding approvingly. I thought it was great.
Well, I mean, maybe he would, because he was a mathematician. Of course, that's I forgot the name of it now. It's somebody's arrow. Begins with an A. Doesn't matter. But it is a sort of a thought exercise about halving the distance and can the arrow ever hit a target, because over a period of time it always just halves the distance next. And actually there was another thing about that story. Actually, it does pull from a lot of different aspects of my life. So I've got a maths degree, although don't ask me to do any integration differentiation now. It's been far too many years. But it instilled a way of thinking, and that's still an aspect of the way I approach what I do. But so I worked in medical records in a hospital for the longest time, so that's also included in there as well. In fact, if you've heard the story, this probably means nothing if you haven't, but if you've heard the story, the corridor that I mentioned, and this window in the corridor is actually a real place. It is a place in a hospital called Western Eye Hospital in sort of northwest London.
Wow!
It was a place I'd known, a place I'd seen. Essentially, there were no fairies in it, but. Yeah.
So how many mushrooms did you have to eat before you started seeing fairies? That's
probably relevant to we're probably going to edit this out. But my favourite thing about Western Eye Hospital, it is an eye hospital, as the name suggests. But the road next to Western Eye Hospital in London is called Seymour Place. And I love that. That's just brilliant.
I was going to say that's beyond ironic. It's yes, excellent city planning is what that is.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. Now, so Rob, I guess my question for you coming off of that would be, I do the same thing. You hear these things, write what you know, and so. Most of my writing is in some way, shape, or form informed by or populated by my own memories, my own emotions, my own experiences, and then I write off of that. And obviously not everything that happens in my stories is, real, because I write some pretty supernatural horror stuff that, oh my goodness, I hope it's not real. So is that what you normally do for your writing, or is that at least how you get started with your own writing prompts? Do you just take a memory and say, here's this place. What am I going to do? And I will say one of the terms you used that really caught me was you used the term the conclave eternal. And I thought that was wonderful, brilliant imagery using words of a place that immediately takes it from the physical realm of reality into fantasy, and fantastical. Yeah. And so do you take a common everyday memory or experience in your life and then change it to suit your writing needs, or what do you do?
I don't know. I guess it does vary from story to story. There are certain pieces where what I'm looking for is just, a fun sort of action beat. And that's very rarely taken from that. That's just, I see the movie screen, and I write what's on the movie screen, essentially. But if I'm looking for something which is going to generate more of an emotional connection, then yeah, absolutely. Reality connects to the reader because that's what they've also experienced generally. So yeah, I'm looking for. I hope so. Anyway, I'm looking for that connection with a real thing. Even in the more because I write a lot of fantasy and science fiction and all the rest of it, but trying to find something which I can latch onto to be a grounding element in the story at least. Yeah.
So for me, negative space is an intriguing concept. So now I'm kind of interested in what inspired the story. Were you just gazing into negative space, as it were, one day and suddenly thought, aha? It's not something I would have thought of.
It was the title which came first, before the story was in my head. I was reading an article or something. I can't remember. It was written sort of 10 years ago now, so I don't really remember exactly what the genesis of it was. But there was something I was reading about, the concept of negative space in art and working with that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh wow, that if that was a place, there could be rulers of it, and that got me to the Lords of Negative Space, and I went, that is a really cool title. What is the story behind that title?
Right.
And that's where it sprang from. Like you guys, because I have listened to your podcast, I know this. Like you guys, I am also a pantser. I hate that word, by the way. I do not like that word. Again, being British, pants means something different.
British people with your wrong understanding of nouns.
Good. I'm out. This interview's over. I'm out. But I also, I sat down at a keyboard with that title and tried to find out where I was going to go with it, essentially. And it really was as I wrote it as it came to me. I went back and then filled in some stuff and foreshadowed things and that kind of side of things in second draft. But the first draft was very much, just trying to explore what that title might mean.
Now, when you do that, Rob, do you do that in your head, or do you literally just have this inspiration and start typing? Because for me personally, I think about it a lot in my head before I begin typing. So when it comes out as the first draft, it's a pretty complete story. How about you?
Yeah, I did. Again, it's a bit of a variable moving feast for me. I think with that one, it really was almost just let's type the next thing and see what occurs to me. Essentially, but a lot of the time, I do say I'm a pants or whatever my feeling of the word. But I have often spent a good couple of weeks filtering that in the back of my head before I put. I've not written an outline. I've not written, whatever. But I generally I know where I'm going with the story. If not quite how I'm going to get there. Yeah.
Now, along the way, do your characters surprise you? Do they just pop up and say, "Surprise! Here I am," and then they interact in the story, or do you have an idea of who the characters are going to be before you start writing?
I don't know that I hear a lot of writers saying about, "Oh yes, my characters just told me this," or "just surprised me by doing this," and I have to say it's never really happened to me that way. And brilliant if they do. That must be really helpful.
It's actually a sign of mental illness. So,
so no, I don't generally get surprised by my characters. I generally, sometimes if I got stuck on a story, and I will sometimes have the next bit come to me just as I'm drifting off to sleep. It is the most inconvenient time for an idea for a story to appear in your head, but it does seem to be one of the more common ones, sadly. And that usually means I don't get to sleep at all. But yeah, so. But I think generally it's a logical progression from where. So I don't think my characters have ever surprised me. I hope they surprise the readers from time to time.
Right.
Yeah.
But no sudden lightning bolt moments really for my characters.
Yeah.
So Rob, this story is in the present tense. Was that a deliberate choice, or did it just seem more natural for the story? Because for me, it meant I actually felt like I was alongside Sarah. Okay, she couldn't see me, but I felt like I was traveling that path with her.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that one. It all kind of came from it came from challenging myself to not have dialogue in there. It meant that there had to be a voice because it needed a voice. Mm-hmm. And that's why it suddenly became third person omniscient, not something I generally write very often, mm-hmm. because I actually think it's very difficult to do it well.
Yeah.
And the first person, it's not the first person, the present tense kind of seemed to flow from that, to be honest. The fact it was being third person omniscient. As I say, Laws of Negative Space, it is my favourite story of mine. It is completely different from everything else I've ever written. I don't write third person omniscient. I don't write present tense. It is unique in my oeuvre. That's not the right word either. No, but it is unique in my works. perhaps I should go and write some more of them. Yeah.
See,
okay. That's the message from today.
This is your new writing prompt.
You write more like that.
Well,
so many people. I've had over the years. A number of people have told me that that I should write more in this setting, in this book, in the Lords of Negative Space world, and turn it into a novel. And I've always kind of resisted it because I kind of said everything that I mean, you've not heard it all. Obviously, you've only heard the first 20 minutes or so. But I kind of got to the point where I've said everything I wanted to say about those characters and about that world. And I found it really difficult. I mean, despite everyone going, "Oh, I want to read more about it," I'm going, "No, actually, this is as long as it should be. This is what it should have in it. These are the characters that should be involved." And it was very satisfied as a complete entity.
Well, that's something that Greg and I have touched on too, is the reason we started this podcast is because it's okay for a story to be short. A story should be as long as it needs to be. And I think that really the fact that people engaged with the story, the fact that people really enjoy the story and they want more, that's actually a testament to the fact that you did the short story well.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I'm sure you would.
Again, British, I don't like to say that I did something well. I would much rather tell you I did it terribly.
Right. But it's good. It's a good story. It's well done.
I think it is, but I might have taken my passport away as a result.
Yeah. But I think that's the beauty of the short story, is that you can, if you craft it well enough, you can tell a short story, you can engage a reader, you can get an emotional response, you can even get a desire for more, but it doesn't have to be, because you say, the story's been told. Everything that needed to be told in the story has been told. It's done. Not everything needs to be a 15-volume collection of 150,000-word novels. And I think that some people really desire that these days. They want another edition and another edition and another edition. And it's like, sometimes you have these characters in this situation, and I think to tell more than what you need to tell would almost be doing harm to that concept and who
I agree.
Characters are. One thing that I really liked about the story was really the twisting of normal or real versus supernatural and unreal. It's got a really very cerebral, psychedelic feel, as Greg said. It's sort of like an Alice in Wonderland type feel. My question is this: so you don't do the present tense third person omniscient in your regular writings. My question is, do the rest of your writings sort of have that same fantastical feel, even if they're not in the same voice as this writing? Do you find that that's where you're drawn towards as an author, or do you think that you're more scattered along the spectrum?
One of the joys of, because I haven't really mentioned that this story is available not just on my podcast and not just the intro of it on your podcast, but it's also available in a book from Inklings Press. And I've worked with Inklings Press now for, I think we've got 9 books out. I've worked with them on the last 7. I wasn't around for the first couple. And we choose a new genre for every anthology that we put out. So we've done a sort of pure science fiction one, a pure fantasy one, science fantasy, a horror one. I didn't get involved because horror's not my bag. We've done a couple of alternate history anthologies as well. And as a result, I've written all sorts of stuff, and they all have their own different voice and they all have their own different style to them. So I don't think I've really put myself in any one pigeonhole, really, as to what it is I write yet. Maybe that's something that will happen the longer I do this thing. But as it stands right now, I've got a science fiction Agatha Christie homage in Tales from the Universe. I've got a kind of an emotional examination of loss in one of the alternate history ones. I've got a ridiculous sort of science fantasy romp in a sort of Edgar Rice Burroughs kind of vein in Tales of Wonder. So, yeah, I mean, wonderful stuff that working with the Inklings guys, I've managed to run a whole gamut of different styles and story types, and I love it.
Excellent. I think that's wonderful when authors are free to express themselves however they want to in all these different genres. Do you think that writing across various genres has in any way affected marketing abilities, since you are not a science fiction author, or you are not a fantasy author, or you are not a crime author? Is it harder to peg your authorial identity?
I mean, maybe so. I mean, I have to say, for most of the anthology stuff, most of the Inkling Press stuff, I kind of subsume author Rob Edwards into the entity of Inklings Press, really. So I think we, as a group, have built a reputation about creating interesting anthologies with quality and variety in what we do. And I think that is our marketing identity in that regards. In terms of me and my writing, Greg mentioned The Ascension Machine, my novel, which has just been released at the start of September. Maybe that will become the thing that Rob Edwards, the author, is known for. But Rob Edwards, the contributor and part of Inklings Press, is a much broader scope than that.
Now, as you just mentioned your new novel, I have a question. It's kind of two questions. First of all, what made you make the jump from writing short stories to writing a novel? And secondly, how was the experience of writing a novel after writing short stories? Were you aware of the expanded space that was available to you whilst you were writing it?
Interesting question. I have tried to write novels since really I started trying to write. When I had a science fiction detective story that I started when I was a teenager. And that was always intended to be a novel. I never got past, I think, 4 chapters, I think, is what I actually got written of it. But I was a teenager and distracted by all manner of things back then. I started writing another novel, which I've read I've read a large chunk of on my podcast, which started writing in 1998, 1999, I think I started writing it. That is really be finished one of these days. So I've been writing that for 20 years. I'm very happy with it. It's called Written Blood and Silver, and it's a kind of urban fantasy, demons on the London Underground story. I've read 12 chapters of that on my podcast. So I've always kind of written both. I've written novels and short stories. The short stories got finished, I guess, is the thing which was the biggest differentiator between my novel writing and my short story writing until this one, until The Ascension Machine, which actually has been finished and is available, and buy it now. Thumbs up.
There you
go. So yeah, I mean, someone asked me what the difference between writing a short story and writing a novel was the other day, or in an interview that I did for a blog somewhere, and I said the biggest difference is there are so many more words in a novel, and that was the biggest thing, really. I don't know, because I've always written both, because I've always written written projects that were intended to be both. I don't know that I've ever really considered much about the difference. It really is kind of, what is the story I want to tell, and how big is the story I want to tell? This novel that I've written, I try not to talk about it because short is the new long, as we know. But it jumped into my head as a 3-book series, and I knew what the first book was going to be, and I knew what the second book was going to be, and I've got a bit more of a nebulous idea of what the third book is going to be, but I do know how it ends. So that was the size of that story. That was what I knew I needed it to be. But a lot of the time when I'm writing short stories, I'm not looking for an idea which is going to take up that bigger space. I'm looking for an idea which can be told and told. I mean, hopefully well. I mean, I'm British again. How would I know? Oh dear. But yes, so
you're sorry right now. Would you like to?
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Do you realise that now Rob has made it so that I can never say anything good about my stories?
But you've been by Brazil, mate. You can. I'm sure you can say whatever you like about your stuff.
Well, now, Rob. So, even though you've always written short stories and novels, short and long, the process for writing, are you still a quote-unquote pantser as you write your novels, or do you spend a little bit more time developing plot, at least an outline? I'm not saying, you have to spend hours on storyboards stretched across your wall or anything, but do you at least have a little bit more structure when writing a novel before you actually begin writing?
I guess with a novel which I actually finished writing, I guess I did. No, I didn't have big long storyboards. I didn't have huge outlines. I kind of started it knowing. Some of it was informed by the fact that it is a superhero story, and that there is, there needs to be the big Act 3 fight, and there's certainly anchor points within the novel that I knew had to get to. There was probably that. There was probably signposts that I knew I was writing towards. But there were huge swathes in the middle where I was just sort of fumbling along my way along the rope bridge, trying to work out where it was going. So I guess a little bit more planning with the novels, but not as much as you might think. I think it was still a fairly organic. Let's see how it's going and where it's going process.
Excellent.
I mean, it started. I have to say, it started as a nano project. I actually wrote the first 40,000 words on the bus to work, and grabbing an hour here or 5 minutes there or whatever. It then got to 40,000 words and then sort of died for about 2 or 3 years. But when I came back to it and rewrote it, that's where the version of the story that people are reading now actually comes from. But yeah, that first 40,000 words of it really was a kind of frantic. I've got 20 minutes on the number 7 bus before I get to work.
Right.
Can I get another 300 words down, basically?
Right. Awesome. Now, in my day job, I'm a pastor, and I talk with people, and I listen to people, and I hear their problems. And I also spent 10 years working in the mental health system. And so whenever I read or listen to a story, I always pick up on little snippets, little themes and stuff like that. And I always wonder, well, what is this telling me about the author? And now I don't try to psychologize the author. I'm not thinking, Rob is a basket case. Holy cow, he needs to be institutionalized. But no, I didn't think that. But there were a couple elements that I picked up on in the story that I was actually wondering if they make any appearances. And maybe you haven't thought of this, because a lot of us are not usually aware of our proclivities until someone points them out to us. But
I'm very excited by this question. I don't know where it's going, but I'm quite fascinated to get there. Do
you have issues with your parents? No, two things, two themes that I picked up on, because it's fantasy, so you allow for a lot of different things, and you say, well, they're not crazy; they're just a fantasy author. But one was, personally, at the beginning of the story, I thought that Gertrude's name is awesome, and yet she hates her parents. So, and I will say this: something that I have encountered is in the real world, bad names result in at least some bitterness focused towards parents. So I was wondering if that is a thing that appears anywhere else in your writings. And also, technology fails when confronted by magic. And the example, of course, is the cell phone that refuses to work. It's covered in the dust and everything. And then, so is there a struggle between, and the dust is alive. The dust is not just dust. It's alive because when it's wiped off, it crawls down of its own accord off the pant leg and onto the floor. So is technology versus the organic, is that also a theme in any of your writings as well? Or did that just work its way in your story? I think about it.
I think, to be honest, that was just. I don't know that is a theme that I've revisited very often. Although, having said that, in my science fantasy story, the spaceship they travel in is powered by witches, which amuses me. So there's a magic versus technology thing going on.
Are they
there.
like on bicycles, or is it?
No. They sacrifice chickens to make the transwarp drive go, basically.
Love it.
So there's that. No, I mean the short answer is no. I don't think that's a theme which is particularly strong. It's certainly strong in that story because that kind of story is about that.
Right.
You get. I mean, you say you've only heard the first third or so of the story, but there is a lot more about the different approach of the Fae in the story and the humans in the stories and the way they approach the world. Right. And there is a kind of technology versus magic is definitely a theme in that story. It's not something I necessarily revisit very often in my other works.
So we said earlier that you could plug something, Rob. I imagine it will be your new book. Because
well, I might if you can just indulge me briefly, I might just plug two things.
Sure.
I'll get to the Ascension Machine in just a moment, but it would be remiss of me not to mention Inklings Press's latest anthology as well, because that also came out only about 6 weeks ago. And it is an anthology of short stories and seemed a bit more on brand for this podcast, maybe. And it is called Tales from the Pirates' Cove. And it is 12 stories of pirates, essentially. But it is, it's another one we've got a couple of our books which are very much genre spanning. So with this one and Tales from the Underground as well. But Tales from the Pirates' Cove, it has, space pirates, it has traditional pirates, it has traditional pirates meets horror, it has time pirates, and it just has, I think one of my favourite stories in the book, not mine, obviously, one of my favourite stories in the book is a story about a time pirate investigating the theft of 1989, which I just... As a concept, I love it. Jennifer Lee Rosman, I think her name is. That. Sorry, I should check that. But it is a fantastic story, and it's just really super weird, a little bit romantic and fantastic. And 12 stories in Tales from the Pirates' Cove, and I think it is one of our best works so far as an anthology. And I do encourage people, if they're into short stories, to go pick it up, because it is it's a pretty fantastic read, I think. So that's the plug for that.
Excellent.
Out of the way. So yes, I'm going to hold up my book, although no one else can see it, but Adam and Greg can see the cover, isn't it?
Yes, we can see
it. We can see that. See what you're missing, podcast land listener.
Secret podcast land video feed thing. Yeah, no, the Ascension Machine. It is a story about identity. It's a story about discovering who you are. It's set in a college, which for me is a time when a lot of people really discover the person they are going to be as a grown-up,
sure,
as an adult. Let's say adult, because I'm not sure that grown-up really applies
yes.
for me.
No, we don't.
So yeah, quite. So it is. It's set up. It's also a superhero novel, and the idea of secret identity is kind of baked into that, and they kind of gel together. And the kind of the sort of icing on the top is that my main character, whose name we never learn in the entire book, he goes by Gray for most of it, is a con man, a con artist, basically. I mean, he's 17 years old, so he's a bit of but he's a grifter, and he ends up at this college for superheroes while pretending to be somebody else.
Wow.
And he arrives there and he thinks, well, this is just ridiculous. All these people pretending to be superheroes. And then he kind of decides that actually he's kind of enjoying his life there. And he finds a life there. And then suddenly he's kind of going, oh, if I'm staying here, I've got to keep this lie going. And that means that he, as these things do, it tends to spiral out of control as to what his lie can be, and events overtake him. And at the end, there's a big action scene because superheroes. But it is, I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of it, not least because it is a novel I've actually finished writing, which is, pretty exciting. But it is something which, I think it has got a strong theme, the theme of identity. There's a bit of found family in there, a bit about, what it is. The title is The Essential Machine. It was for the longest time as a working title called So You Want to Be a Space Alien Superhero. And that's still baked into the story as well. That it is about that, about finding out whether Gray wants to be a superhero and what that means for him. Excellent.
How many words is it? Do you know the word count?
83,000.
Hey, there we go.
Pass it. It's a bit above our limit, yes.
yes, it is.
But we'll let it sneak in under the radar or above the radar. I'm not sure which it is. Now, where can they purchase that? And where can they get the Inklings Press anthology as well?
Inklings Press, all of our books are on Amazon, Kindle and paperback. So fill your boots, really. That's the place to get them. The Essential Machine, which isn't published through Inklings Press, it's published through Artemisia, and that can also be got at Barnes and Noble. I think here in Finland, the only place I found you can get it is Ad Libris, the website, the bookstore, online bookstore there. But I'm sure it's in other places as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. Well, I would like to thank you for joining us this morning, Rob. Well, it's morning for us.
No, it's been my pleasure.
Listeners are out there. It's afternoon for you. We're all over the world. We're global. We are global.
Very much so.
But any last thoughts? Any last words? Any last comments? Any pithy remark you want to leave us with, or you can leave us with a totally banal, non-pithy remark as well.
I just wanted to, I guess there was one thing I wanted to add. My stories, whenever I've written them, have always been written with the intent that they're read aloud. Whenever I write, I should mention my podcast, actually, while I'm here, Storycast Rob, available on Spotify, Apple, and probably other places as well, or at my website, storycastrob.co.uk. But everything I write is intended to be read aloud. Even my novel, 83,000 words of it. I actually have never read the entire thing aloud, but every bit as it's written, every chapter as it's written, I always read it aloud because that's how you hear lines which are bad or dull.
Right. Well, you do have the voice for it as well.
Well, thank you very much.
If you're not doing voiceover work, if you're not narrating audiobooks, you should be.
It is something that I want to do an audiobook for the Essential Machine. Basically, is one of the things that I would like to achieve. And maybe from that, I will start doing audiobooks for other people as well. But start with my own, really. Get the kinks ironed out there. But yeah, so that's really, I love telling stories, not just writing stories, but I love telling them. And that's why I love the short story format so much, because it is something you can spend half an hour reading out loud, or spend an hour reading out loud in the case of Laws of Negative Space. And I think that there's a real connection. I've done a few readings from my books and short stories and stuff, and you can get a real connection with your audience that way, which I love. I absolutely adore. So there we go. That was my final thought.
Excellent. And it was not banal at all. That was wonderful.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Rob, once again, I thank you for joining us on the very first author interview for Short is the New Long. And
fantastic.
I would just like to tell you that I have greatly enjoyed your story, and I look forward to not just hearing the end of it, but also reading and listening to much more of your work. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys.
Same goes for me as well. I really want to know what happens later.
Yes.
Episode 5 of my podcast, or Tales from the Underground. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Short is the New Long. Be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes updated every Tuesday.